My name is Nora Colby. I am 33 years old. I am standing in the mudroom of a lodge I have never technically owned, but have known every load-bearing beam of since I was 19, holding a casserole dish that has gone cold in my hands, listening to 60 people I grew up with go quiet one at a time as they realize I am not supposed to be here. The dish is heavier than it should be. Colleen Drummond made it. Sweet potatoes with a little pecan crust. The recipe she's made every Thanksgiving since I was 26 years old and sat at her kitchen table because I didn't have anywhere else warm to go. She's standing to my left in a navy wool coat, snow still melting on the shoulders. Howard Drummond is on my right, his hand resting light on my back, not pushing, just present, the way he has been present for 7 years now in every single place my own family wasn't. The room smells like wood smoke and roasting turkey and, underneath it, the particular scent of cedar paneling that means I am standing inside Hartwell Lodge, the property my grandfather built with his own hands in 1974, the property my mother has spent the last 14 months telling everyone at this party now belongs, free and clear, to her and my sister. She does not know yet that it doesn't. I want to tell you how I ended up in this doorway at 6:52 in the evening, 5 minutes after my family told 60 guests I wasn't coming. Because it did not begin tonight. It began 3 years ago. At 6:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, in a family group chat I still have saved, screenshot by screenshot, on a phone I have never deleted a single message from. I need to back up further than that, though, because you won't understand why 6:47 p.m. mattered so much unless you understand what came before it. I am the middle child of Dennis and Diane Hartwell, born 11 months after my sister Brooke and 4 years before my brother Tyler, which in my family has always meant something specific. Brooke was the first grandchild, the pretty one, the one who did dance recitals and got engaged at 24 to a man our mother still calls a real catch in front of me, as though I might not have noticed the emphasis. Tyler was the baby, the one everyone still calls the baby, even though he is 30 and manages a car dealership in Eugene. And I was the one in the middle who read too much and asked too many questions and didn't smile in family photos the way Brooke did, wide and easy, like smiling cost her nothing. My mother has a way of dismissing you that doesn't sound like dismissal if you're not the one on the receiving end of it. She doesn't yell. She doesn't call you stupid. She just recalibrates the room around you quietly so that by the time you notice what's happened, you're already standing outside it. We just think Brooke has a better sense of these things, she told me once, when I was 17 and had asked to help plan my grandfather's 70th birthday party. You've always been more of a background person. And that's okay. Not everyone needs to run the show. I said nothing. I picked up a stack of napkins that needed folding and folded them instead. That was the first entry in what I eventually started calling, privately, the ledger. Every dismissal, every time I was quietly moved out of the center of my own family and told it was for the best. I didn't track it because I was bitter. I tracked it because somewhere around 22 I realized that if I didn't write it down, my mother would eventually convince me it hadn't happened, the way she'd convinced herself. I went to law school on a partial scholarship my family didn't ask about the size of. I specialized in trusts, estates, and commercial property law, the unglamorous, paperwork-heavy corner of the profession that nobody at a dinner party wants to hear about, which suited me fine, because nobody in my family ever asked. By 29, I was a senior associate at a firm in downtown Seattle that handled estate planning for families with more real estate than they knew what to do with. By 31, I made partner. My mother found out from my aunt, 6 months after the fact, at a barbecue. "You made partner and didn't tell us?" she said, in the tone of someone genuinely wounded, as though I hadn't mentioned it at 3 separate family dinners and been redirected each time to a story about Brooke's kitchen renovation. I said nothing. I reached for my drink instead. That is the shape of my silence. One sentence, one small physical motion, and then I move on. I learned a long time ago that arguing with my mother's version of events only ever gave her more material to work with. So I stopped arguing. I started documenting. Here is the part of the story where I have to tell you about my grandfather because everything that happened later runs through him. Walter Hartwell built Hartwell Lodge on 11 acres outside Bend, Oregon, back when the land was cheap and the town was smaller than the parking lot of the shopping center that now sits 2 miles from its gate. He built it as a hunting cabin that grew, over 4 decades, into a proper lodge, 6 bedrooms, a great room with a stone fireplace you could stand inside, a kitchen he rebuilt himself in 1998 after a pipe burst. It is the only place in my entire childhood that ever felt like it belonged to all of us equally. My grandfather never once made me feel like the background person. He taught me to split wood on that property. He taught me to read a property survey on that property. Sitting at the kitchen table with a magnifying glass and a cup of coffee, he let me drink black starting when I was 14, which my mother was furious about for entirely unrelated reasons. He died 4 years ago, in February, in the front bedroom of that lodge, with all of us in the house. His will was simple in every way except one. The lodge and its 11 acres went into a trust, the Hartwell Family Trust, to be held for the benefit of all 3 grandchildren equally, administered by 2 co-trustees. He named my mother as one. He named me as the other. I still remember the exact moment the estate attorney read that clause aloud, in a conference room that smelled like the same lemon oil they use on every conference table in every law office in the Pacific Northwest, because I watched my mother's face do something I had never once seen it do. It went perfectly, completely still. "There must be some mistake," she said afterward, in the parking lot, to me directly for possibly the first time in a decade. "Why would he name you? You don't even come up here that much anymore." I didn't come up as much because I'd stopped being invited to things that weren't obligatory. I didn't say that. I said, "I don't know. Maybe he thought I'd take care of it properly." I said nothing else. I got in my car. What my mother did not understand, what she has never once, in 4 years, taken the time to understand, is that a co-trustee is not a ceremonial title. Under Oregon trust law, and under the specific language of my grandfather's trust document, no sale, transfer, mortgage, refinance, or material change of use of the trust property can occur without the written signature of both trustees. Not a majority vote. Not a family conversation where everyone nods and Brooke says something reasonable sounding and everyone agrees it's fine. Both signatures. Mine and my mother's. She has spent 14 months trying to work around a piece of paper she has never actually read past the first page. The plan, as I eventually pieced it together, mostly from things Tyler let slip, because Tyler has never been good at keeping a secret from me even when everyone else in the family has gotten very good at it, was this. My mother wanted to transfer the lodge fully into Brooke's name. Brooke and her husband had been talking for a year about converting it into a wedding and events venue, the kind of thing that gets featured in regional bridal magazines, $40,000 bookings on summer weekends, a business that could genuinely support them. My mother loved the idea. My mother loved, even more, the idea of telling people her daughter ran a beautiful venue outside Bend that used to be Dad's old hunting lodge, a story that made for excellent conversation at her book club. There was only one obstacle. Me. Not because I wanted the lodge for myself. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to tell the story as though I was defending some grand inheritance. I wasn't. I would have signed off on almost any reasonable plan for that property, including Brooke's venue idea, if anyone had simply asked me. What I would not do, what I told my mother directly, in an email in September, the only formal communication either of us had sent the other in over a year, was sign a transfer that stripped Tyler and me of our equal beneficial interest without any compensation, replacing 3 equal shares with 1, so that Brooke and her husband could take out a commercial mortgage against the full appraised value of the property and use the proceeds to fund the renovation. That's not what Dad wanted, I wrote. He wanted it held for all 3 of us. I'm not signing away Tyler's share and mine for nothing. Send me a plan that's actually fair, and I'll look at it in good faith. My mother did not send me a plan. My mother sent me nothing for 6 weeks. And then, on a Wednesday in late September, at 6:47 p.m., she sent something else entirely, to the family group chat, the one with 11 people in it, the one that had somehow never included a single conversation about the trust at all. I want to pause here before I tell you what that message said, because I need to ask you something. If you've ever been the one in a family who did everything by the rules, read the fine print, followed the process, Try to be fair even when nobody was being fair to you, and watch that get treated as an obstacle instead of an asset. I want to know. Tell me where you're watching this from right now. Because what happened at 6:47 p.m. is the kind of thing that only makes sense to people who've lived it. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I was standing in my own apartment in Seattle, 40 minutes from finishing a closing memo for a client, and I almost didn't look at it. I looked at it. Brooke, don't come to Thanksgiving this year. I don't want drama today. We just want it to be nice. Mom, it's easier if you just stay home this year, sweetheart. We'll explain it to everyone else. Dad, your mother and I talked about this a lot. We just think it's better for now. I read it 3 times. I did not answer. I set my phone face down on the counter and finished my closing memo, because I have learned that the only thing worse than my family excluding me is letting them watch it land. I understood, in the way you understand a thing you've been braced for without admitting you were braced for it, exactly what this was. It was not about drama. Brooke and I hadn't spoken more than 4 sentences to each other in 8 months. There was no incident, no fight, no scene that needed avoiding. This was a negotiating tactic dressed up as a family boundary. My mother had decided that if I would not sign the transfer voluntarily, the next best strategy was to isolate me, quietly, socially, in front of everyone, until the pressure of being the one Hartwell not at Thanksgiving became enough to make me fold. I did not fold. I read it once more. I typed nothing back. I called Marcus instead. Marcus Drummond and I had been together for 2 years by then, engaged for 3 months, and in that time I had watched something happen that I still find difficult to describe without my voice changing. His parents, Howard and Colleen, had simply absorbed me, not performatively, not in the loud, over-the-top way some families adopt a partner as a bit, a joke about the new kid. They asked me questions and waited for the actual answers. Colleen taught me her sweet potato recipe standing at her stove, correcting my knife grip without making me feel stupid about it. Howard, who had built a commercial construction and property development company from a single truck in 1988 into one of the largest privately held firms in the Pacific Northwest, once spent an entire Sunday afternoon walking through a zoning dispute with me just because I'd mentioned, in passing, that I found it interesting. I had never told them the full extent of what my own family was doing. I told Marcus the broad strokes, the trust, the pressure, the growing coldness, but I hadn't wanted his parents to think less of people they'd never met. That night, though, sitting in my apartment with the group chat still open on my phone, I told Marcus everything. And Marcus told his parents. I did not ask them to come to Thanksgiving with me. I want to be clear about that because it matters. It was Colleen who called me 2 days later. "We'd like to take you to dinner Thursday," she said. "Somewhere nice. You shouldn't spend the day alone because your family made a bad decision." "I don't want you to feel like you have to do anything about this," I said. "We don't feel like we have to," Colleen said. "We want to. There's a difference, and I think you've spent a long time around people who don't know it." I didn't say anything for a moment. I looked at the window instead. Here is where I have to tell you about the part of my professional life that my family has never once bothered to ask about, because it is the part that made everything that happened on Thanksgiving possible, and because it is, I think, the actual point of the story. In October, 3 weeks after the group chat message, 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, I was assigned as lead trust counsel on an unrelated matter for my firm, a commercial property refinancing package for a mid-sized development client who was consolidating several rural Oregon parcels under a single holding structure ahead of a spring construction season. It was routine work. I pulled county records, ran title searches, cross-referenced parcel numbers against existing liens the way I do a dozen times a month. One of the parcel numbers stopped me cold. It belonged to an 11-acre property outside Bend that I recognized instantly because I had grown up on it. Hartwell Lodge. The client's development company had submitted a purchase inquiry, not yet a completed transaction, just a preliminary offer letter, sitting in a file, to acquire the lodge property directly from my mother and sister, contingent on their being able to deliver clear, unencumbered title within 90 days. My mother and Brooke had apparently abandoned the venue idea sometime in October and decided, instead, that selling the property outright to a developer for immediate cash was simpler than running a business neither of them had ever operated. The offer was for $1,180,000. My mother, according to the file notes, had told the buyer's agent that clear title was not a problem and that the other trustee was just a formality that would be resolved before closing. I sat in my office for a long time after I found that file. I did not call my mother. I did not call Brooke. I called the firm's conflicts department, disclosed the family relationship immediately, and recused myself from that specific matter within the hour, because I take my license more seriously than I have ever taken my mother's approval. But before I recused, I confirmed one fact for my own understanding, using nothing but public record. The buyer's development company was Drummond Pacific Holdings. Howard Drummond's company. Neither Howard nor Marcus knew anything about the connection when the offer letter first crossed my desk. It was genuinely a coincidence. Drummond Pacific had been quietly acquiring rural parcels outside Bend for over a year as part of an unrelated regional expansion, long before my mother ever decided to sell. I want to be precise about that because this isn't a story about anyone rigging anything. It's a story about what happens when the people who dismissed you spend 14 months making decisions about a property without ever once checking who is standing on the other side of the paperwork. I told Marcus that same night, in careful, factual language, that his father's company had made an offer on my family's lodge without knowing it was connected to me at all, and that I had already recused myself professionally. He was quiet for a moment. "Does my dad know it's your family's place?" he asked. "Not from me. Not yet." "Do you want him to walk away from the deal?" I thought about that question for longer, then felt comfortable. "No," I finally said. "I want them to find out on their own terms who actually holds the pen." The next 6 weeks pass the way weeks pass when you are holding something very carefully so it doesn't spill. I went to work. I finished the recusal paperwork properly, in writing, filed with the appropriate internal compliance office, so that nothing about what I already knew could ever be characterized as improper. I attended 2 more group chat conversations that did not include me in any meaningful way, watching Brooke coordinate seating charts and my mother debate turkey brine recipes with my aunt, both of them apparently having decided that my exclusion from the holiday required no further comment, discussion, or acknowledgement. Not one person in that chat asked where I would be spending Thanksgiving. Not one person asked if I was okay. I did not respond to any of it. I said nothing. I let the silence do what it does. Twice during those 6 weeks, my mother called me directly, not to discuss the trust, not to apologize for the group chat, but to ask, in a tone that suggested she genuinely didn't understand the question she was asking, whether I would be willing to just sign the paperwork so we can all move forward as a family. I told her both times that I would review any proposal that treated all 3 grandchildren equitably. I did not mention the offer letter. I did not mention Drummond Pacific. I did not mention that I now knew, with legal certainty, that no closing on that property could occur without a signature I had absolutely no intention of providing to a deal I hadn't been shown, negotiated, or informed about as a co-trustee, which is itself a serious problem for my mother, separate from anything about family feelings, because a trustee has a fiduciary duty to inform her co-trustee of material transactions. She had not informed me. She had let me find out from a stranger's file on my own desk. Howard, for his part, moved forward with his standard diligence process, the same one his firm ran on every acquisition, regardless of family connections neither he nor his diligence team yet knew existed. Title search. Trust document review. Confirmation of trustee authority. That confirmation came back to Drummond Pacific's legal department on the Monday before Thanksgiving. I know this because Howard called me himself, not Marcus, and I could hear, even over the phone, that he was trying very hard not to laugh. "Nora," he said, "I think you should sit down." "I already know," I said. "You already know that the co-trustee on this trust who has to sign off on the sale of your family's lodge is you?" "I've known for 6 weeks." There was a long pause. "Why didn't you say something?" I looked out my apartment window at the gray November evening, at the lights coming on across the city, and I thought about 17 years old, folding napkins, being told I was a background person. I thought about 6:47 p.m. I thought about every quiet recalibration of every room I had ever been moved out of the center of. Because I wanted them to find out the same way they've always made me find things out, I said. By not being told. Thanksgiving fell that year, on a Thursday. My mother had decided, without asking me, without telling me, informing me only secondhand through Tyler 2 days beforehand, that this year's family gathering would be held at the lodge itself. One last big Hartwell Thanksgiving before it's someone else's, as she reportedly told my aunt.
60 people.
Extended family, neighbors, my grandfather's old hunting friends, Brooke's future in-laws. A closing on the Drummond Pacific sale was, in my mother's understanding, scheduled to finalize the following week. She wanted, I think, one last performance of the Hartwell family exactly as she had always wanted it seen. Full, warm, generous, complete, with me quietly absent from the frame. I had not planned to go.
I want to be honest about that.
For 3 days after the group chat message, my plan had simply been to spend Thanksgiving with the Drummonds, exactly as Colleen had offered, and to let the legal reality of the trust announce itself through my attorney the following week, in writing, the way these things are properly handled. That was the responsible plan. That was the plan that kept me out of any scene, any drama, any moment that could later be reframed by my mother as me being difficult. Colleen changed my mind 3 days before, over that same stove where she'd taught me the sweet potato recipe. You don't owe them a scene, she said. But you don't owe them your absence either. You've spent your whole life being the background person so someone else could stand in the light. I've watched you do it for 2 years now, and I love you enough to tell you, you're allowed to just walk into a room. I said nothing for a moment. I reached for the recipe card instead. If I go, I said finally, I'm not going to fight with anyone. I'm not going to announce anything. I'm going to be exactly as calm as I've always been. Good, Colleen said. Calm is scarier than yelling ever was, for people like your mother. Yelling she knows how to survive. Calm, she's never had to. Howard didn't ask a single question when Colleen told him the plan. He simply said, we'll drive. We arrived at 6:52 p.m., 5 minutes after the group chat message that had started this whole thing, 3 years to the week apart almost to the day, though I hadn't planned that timing. The drive from Ben's small airport, where Marcus's flight from a work trip had landed late, simply took longer than expected. It felt, walking up the gravel path in the dark with the porch lights glowing gold against the snow, like the story circling back on itself exactly where it needed to. I heard the party before I saw it. 60 voices layered together, someone's laugh rising above the rest, the specific bright clatter of a room full of people who believe the night is going exactly as planned. I stood in the doorway of the mudroom with Colleen's casserole dish in my hands and Howard and Colleen Drummond on either side of me, and for one full second, nobody noticed us at all. Then Tyler saw me first. His face did the thing faces do when they're trying to process two facts that don't fit together, that I was there and that I wasn't alone. The room went quiet in a wave, table by table, the way silence spreads through a crowd that hasn't yet been told what it's looking at. My mother turned last. She was holding a serving spoon. I watched her face do the thing it had done 4 years ago in that conference room parking lot, go perfectly, completely still.
Nora, she said.
We didn't think you were coming. You told me not to, I said. Not sharp, not raised, just true. I decided to come anyway. Brooke stood up from the head table, her face flushing the particular red it always turns when she's about to say something she's rehearsed. This isn't the time, she said. We have guests.
I know, I said.
That's why I brought some. I introduced them the way you'd introduce anyone. This is Howard and Colleen Drummond, my fiancé Marcus's parents. I did not raise my voice on the next part.
I did not need to.
They've been more of a family to me this year than anyone in this room, and I wanted them here for Thanksgiving.
I hope that's all right.
My mother opened her mouth. Nothing came out of it for a moment. I let her have that moment. I have learned over many years exactly how long a silence needs to be to do its work, and exactly when to stop letting it. Diane, Howard said then, extending a hand toward my mother, warm and entirely unhurried, the voice of a man who has walked into 1,000 rooms holding more leverage than anyone in them realized. It's good to finally meet you. I understand we have some business to discuss before next week. I watched the exact moment my mother's face understood what those two sentences meant together. Marcus's father. Business. Next week. I'm sorry, she said carefully. I don't think we've what business? Drummond Pacific Holdings, Howard said. We're the buyer on the lodge. My legal team completed trustee verification on Monday. He said it gently. He was not performing anything. He was simply telling the truth, the way he tells the truth in every negotiation because he has never once needed volume to be understood. I watched Brooke's face lose color first. My mother's eyes moved to me, then back to Howard, then to me again, as though the sentence she needed wouldn't assemble itself. You knew? This whole time you knew Nora was. I found the file 6 weeks ago, I said. The same week you told me not to come to Thanksgiving. The room had gone completely silent now, 60 people who had come for turkey and small talk suddenly watching something they hadn't been invited to watch, which is, I will admit, exactly the position my mother had tried to put me in 3 years, and again 3 weeks earlier. There's no closing next week, I said.
Come.
Even. There's no closing at all, actually on the terms you agreed to, because you never showed me the offer, never disclosed the transaction to your co-trustee, and never got my signature, which the trust requires. Dad's trust. Not yours. Not Brooke's. Grandpa's. We were going to tell you before closing, my mother said, and her voice had lost its usual smoothness now, gone thin at the edges. We didn't want to make things complicated before the holiday. You made it not complicated, I said. You made it easy. You just left me out of it, the way you always do. I did not raise my voice once through any of this. I want that understood clearly because it matters more than anything else in this story. I stood in that doorway with a casserole dish still in my hands, and I told the truth, quietly, to a room full of people who had spent an evening being told a story about a family that was whole and warm and complete, and I let the actual math of the situation do the work that yelling never could. My aunt was the first to speak into the silence, from a table near the fireplace. Wait, she said slowly. Nora's the one who has to sign off on selling the lodge? She's a trust and estate attorney, Marcus said, arriving finally with the bags from the car, taking in the scene in about 4 seconds and stepping easily into it, the way he always does. Partner at her firm. Has been for 2 years. I watched that land across the room in small waves. My grandfather's old hunting friends, my mother's book club neighbors, cousins I hadn't spoken to in a year, all of them recalculating, in real time, a version of me they had apparently never once been given the actual facts about, because nobody in my family had ever thought it worth mentioning. Brooke's fiancé, standing near the drinks table, said quietly to no one in particular, Wait, I thought Nora was like, I don't know, in HR or something? I did not answer that. I did not need to. I set the casserole dish down on the counter, gently, and reached for a napkin instead. There were 3 separate moments after that where the reality of the evening kept reasserting itself, each one smaller than the last, the way a struck bell keeps ringing after the first strike fades. The first was my mother, 20 minutes later, finding me in the kitchen where I'd gone to help Colleen unwrap the second casserole, saying quietly, We can talk about this after dinner. Privately. There's nothing private left to say that a dinner conversation is going to fix, I said. I'll have my attorney send formal correspondence next week, the way this should have been handled from the beginning. You have an attorney? I am an attorney, Mom. I said it without heat. Just a fact, laid down like a napkin folded correctly for the first time in 16 years. I've been one for 8 years. You've just never asked. She didn't say anything to that. I understood it. The second moment was Brooke, an hour later, catching me near the front hall as I was helping Colleen with her coat. You could have just told us, she said, and there was real hurt to her voice, the kind I recognized because I had felt its shape for most of my life, just never from her direction before. You let us plan this whole sale. You let Mom tell everyone it was basically done. I told Mom in September in writing that I wouldn't sign anything that wasn't fair to all 3 of us, I said. She didn't answer for 6 weeks. And then instead of answering, she put a message in the family chat telling me not to come to Thanksgiving. I didn't do this to you, Brooke. I found out about a sale I was never told about from a file that crossed my own desk by accident, 6 weeks after my own family decided the easiest way to handle disagreeing with me was to just stop inviting me to things. Brooke didn't have an answer for that either. I let her finish standing there in the silence before I spoke again. I'm not trying to punish anyone, I said. I'll look at a fair proposal, an actual one, in writing, that treats me and Tyler the same as you. I always would have. Nobody ever asked. The third moment came from Tyler, of all people, at the door, as Howard was bringing the car around. He hugged me, which he almost never does, and said, low enough that only I could hear it, I didn't know any of this. About the trust, about you being all of it. I'm sorry I didn't ask. You don't have to be sorry, I said. You just have to ask next time. I got in the car. I did not look back at the lodge as we pulled down the gravel drive, the windows glowing gold behind us, 60 people inside recalculating a version of a family they thought they understood. I want to tell you what happened 3 weeks later because it matters more than the scene in the doorway. My mother's attorney sent a revised trust distribution proposal, an actual one this time, drafted with counsel, treating Tyler, Brooke, and me as genuinely equal beneficiaries, with a buyout structure that let Brooke keep the lodge if she wanted it, financed properly, with Tyler and me compensated fairly for our shares if we chose to sell ours instead. I reviewed it with my own attorney. It was fair. I signed it. Howard's company withdrew its offer entirely, at my request, before any of it became a conflict worth untangling. Family should stay family business, he told me. I'd rather build my company on parcels that don't have your mother's fingerprints trying to avoid your signature. Brooke and I have spoken 4 times since Thanksgiving. Not warmly, not yet. But 4 times is more than we managed in the 8 months before it. My mother has not apologized, not directly, not in the specific words I once imagined I'd need to hear. What she has done, instead, is start asking questions before making decisions that affect me. It is not everything. It is something. I have learned, slowly, that something is allowed to be enough. I want to tell you something. Setting a limit is not an attack. It is information. When you finally stop absorbing the plans other people make about your life without asking you first, you are not being cruel to them. You are teaching them, often for the first time, where the edge of your patience actually was the whole time. You can love people who dismissed you for years and still refuse to let that dismissal define what you owe them. Love is not a blank check written against your own dignity. It never was, no matter how long you've been told it was. The people who chose to see me, really see me, ask me real questions and wait for real answers, long before there was ever a lodge or a trust or a dramatic doorway moment to prove anything, are more my family, in every way that matters, than the people who share my blood and spent 16 years quietly moving me out of the center of every room. Biology is a fact. Belonging is a choice, made over and over, in small unglamorous moments nobody photographs. Walking away from people who have decided you are a background character in their story is not bitterness. It is the only reasonable response to being written that way for as long as I was. You cannot grow in a room that was never built with space for you in it. And the quiet, on the other side of all of this, the mornings now where nobody is quietly recalibrating a room around me, where nobody needs me to be smaller, so someone else can stand in better light, that quiet is not emptiness. That is what it was supposed to feel like the entire time. My mother excluded me from a family Thanksgiving because she thought it would pressure me into giving up something that was never fully hers to sell. She never imagined that the same silence she used to isolate me would be the exact silence I'd been building, patiently, into the only kind of proof that ever actually changes anything. Tell me honestly, if you had been sitting in that room, watching your own family plan a future that quietly erased you from it, would you have stayed quiet the way I did? Or would you have said something the very first time it happened? The story you just heard was inspired by real experiences shared on public platforms including Reddit and other online communities. It has been thoughtfully adapted and reimagined for storytelling purposes. All characters, situations, names, and settings are fictional, altered, or generated using AI tools. Any resemblance to real individuals or events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. This story was created to deliver positive messages, emotional insight, and meaningful reflection, not to represent or defame any real person or situation.